Have you ever been to China and like hopped on one of their trains
Yeah.
and you're like, wait a minute, this cost how much?
It's really striking.
I know. I mean, we're talking high-speed rail and those
Yeah.
crazy big metro systems, and they're just shockingly affordable. Like, how do they do it?
Yeah, it really makes you rethink what's possible with public transportation.
Well, today we're doing a deep dive into this Reddit discussion that asks that very question.
Okay.
Why is Chinese public transportation so cheap?
Sounds fascinating.
I know, and we've got all these comments from people trying to figure out, like, the how and the why.
I'm intrigued.
So if you're into things like urban planning, or you're thinking of planning a trip to China, or you're just fascinated by how other countries do things,
Right.
this is the deep dive for you.
Definitely.
Okay, so let's start with the original poster's experience.
Okay.
They're talking about Chengdu,
Mm-hmm.
and they were describing the system as clean and efficient.
Okay.
But get this, no shopping malls in the stations.
Oh, and
Yeah, which is so different from a lot of major cities.
yeah, where they make a ton of money off of those station shops.
Exactly. So it immediately makes you wonder about the money part.
The funding model, right?
Yeah, like if they're not getting that retail revenue,
Mm.
where is the money coming from?
Good question.
And then they drop this detail, a trip across Shenzhen.
Which is huge.
Yeah, a massive megalopolis.
Yeah.
Cost them like 42 cents.
What?
Uh,
42 cents?
That's less than a cup of coffee.
I know you can barely buy anything for that these days.
It's incredible.
So how do they make it work financially?
Well, one common assumption that comes up a lot
Yeah.
is that it's because China's a communist country.
Right.
Like this user Quackatekagi,
Uh-huh.
they suggest it's like a strategic government investment to make cities more livable.
Okay.
You know, less traffic and cleaner air.
That makes sense at first.
Yeah.
But then we have another user, additional tap 8907.
Okay.
And they argue that that label of just communist
Right.
doesn't really capture the
I think
complexity.
the nuances, of their economic system.
It's more like state capitalism or a socialist market economy.
Right. It's not so simple.
And that's where it gets really interesting because China's economic model, it doesn't fit neatly into a box.
Right.
It's this blend of state control and market forces,
Yeah.
and that impacts their approach to public transit.
So can you break that down for our listeners?
Sure.
Like, why is that distinction so important?
Well, if we oversimplify it,
Uh-huh.
we miss out on understanding how they've achieved so much growth,
Okay.
especially in their infrastructure.
Like, I hear these terms,
Yeah.
state capitalism, and I'm like, okay.
Right?
But what does that mean, like, on the ground?
Yeah, in practice.
Like, how does that translate to cheap train tickets?
Well, it means the government can direct investment,
Okay.
they can control pricing,
Right.
and prioritize these long-term infrastructure projects
Okay.
in ways that are harder in free market systems.
So it's deeper than just subsidies.
Yeah, it's more about control and strategic planning.
Gotcha. And this is where we see that contrast with the U.S. system,
Right.
which a user Asbudo1 brought up.
Uh-huh.
They were saying, even with subsidies, our systems are pricier than China's.
Yeah, even accounting for cost of living.
Right. And then there's the whole efficiency thing, and
Oh.
cleanliness and reliability.
Yeah, where the U.S. often falls short.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it begs the question, what are the driving forces behind these differences?
Is it all about funding,
Right.
or are there other things at play?
Yeah, because if it were just about money,
Right.
you'd think more countries would have it figured out.
Exactly. And that's where this Reddit discussion gets really insightful.
Okay.
One user, Erlang,
Yeah.
makes this analogy with roads.
Okay.
We don't pay per use for roads,
Okay.
but they're super expensive.
That's a good point.
And they argue that public transit is a similar investment,
Okay.
but with even wider benefits.
So it's not just about the direct cost to me as the rider.
Right.
It's about the impact on traffic and pollution,
Actually,
even the economy.
it's all connected.
So these are all positive externalities.
Right, like side benefits.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mhm.
So we've got the government investment,
Uh-huh.
this idea of public transit as a public good.
Yeah.
But there's still one thing I'm wondering about.
What's that?
The sheer volume of riders in China.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how do they make it work financially with those low fares?
Well, user H1ED1 points out that affordability plus convenience equals high usage,
Got it.
and that high usage generates revenue.
Even with those low fares.
Exactly.
So it's like a cycle.
Virtuous cycle.
The more people use it,
Yeah.
the more sustainable it becomes.
Exactly.
This is so fascinating.
I know, right?
I've never thought about it that way.
It's really interesting.
So we're piecing this puzzle together now.
Yeah.
We've got the investment, the public good angle, the high ridership.
Uh-huh.
but I bet there's more to it.
Oh yeah, there are some really mind-blowing details in this thread.
Okay, lay it on me.
Well, this user, Strix2031, they say, imagine shutting down all public transport in Beijing.
Oh, wow.
To handle that traffic, you'd have to add 7 lanes to every street.
Oh, my God.
God,
Can you imagine?
that would be insane.
It's mind-boggling.
It really puts things into perspective.
Yeah, it shows the impact public transit has on a city.
I know, and it highlights how connected transportation and urban planning are.
They're totally intertwined.
Yeah, it really shows you that public transit isn't just about getting around.
Right.
It's like fundamental to how a city works.
It shapes the whole urban fabric.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But do you think there's a cultural piece to this too?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And it's something the thread touches on.
Okay.
Like in a lot of Western countries, public transportation is seen as a last resort.
Yeah.
Like something you do if you can't afford a car.
Almost like a safety net.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
But in China, it seems different.
Okay.
It's seen as essential to a modern city.
Right.
For everyone.
Not just the poor. Exactly. And that shift in thinking could be as important as the investment itself.
That's a really interesting point.
Yeah.
Because it suggests that copying China's funding model
Right.
might not be enough.
It might not.
We might need to change how we think about public transit.
A deeper cultural shift.
Yeah. So what are some of those cultural factors then?
Well, some users pointed to population density, which makes public transit more necessary.
Right, because everyone's packed in there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But it's not just about necessity.
What else?
There's also this emphasis on collectivism in Chinese culture.
Okay.
Maybe that makes people more open to prioritizing public transit.
Over individual car ownership.
Yeah, exactly.
There's like a mix of things.
Right.
Smart investment efficient systems, population density, but also this cultural mindset.
That values the common good.
Exactly. And that might explain why some countries struggle with this.
Yeah, just throwing money at the problem doesn't always work.
You need that cultural buy-in.
You do, and it makes you wonder, can you really get widespread adoption of public transit
Right.
without changing how people think about it?
That's a great question.
It is, and it makes me think about the role of government.
Yeah.
Is it just about funding and infrastructure,
Right.
or do they need to shape public perception too?
Like promote the benefits of public transit.
Exactly, because even with cheap fares and good systems,
Yeah.
people still need to be convinced to use it.
So maybe we need awareness campaigns or even incentives.
It's possible.
It's like those campaigns to promote recycling
Exactly.
or reduce smoking.
Yeah, those can be effective.
Yeah, because at the end of the day,
Yeah,
public transit's success depends on the people who use it,
exactly. We need to understand their needs.
their motivations.
Even their biases.
But China might have a lot to teach us,
They might.
even if our situations are different.
For sure. And one thing that really stands out from this thread is just how much China has achieved.
Yeah.
They built this modern system for a population bigger than the U.S.
It's incredible.
And they did it pretty quickly.
Right.
So it shows it's not impossible.
It gives me hope.
It might not be easy,
Yeah.
but it can be done.
If we have the will and the investment and the right mindset.
And the willingness to think differently.
Which brings us back to that quote from Erlang,
Oh, yeah, that's a good word.
the one about developed countries and public transit.
Yeah. A developed country is not a place where the poor have cars. It's where the rich use public transportation.
That quote really stuck with me.
It's a powerful statement.
Yeah, it like flips the script on what progress means.
It challenges us to think about what kind of future we want.
Yeah, one where we're all stuck in traffic
Right.
or one where everyone uses public transit.
That's the question we need to ask ourselves.
It's a question for all our listeners to consider.
For their cities,
Their countries.
their own choices.
Yeah, it's a question about what kind of future we're building.
And it shows how everything's connected.
Transportation, urban planning, the economy, culture.
Even our values.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into China's public transit,
Yeah.
what are the key takeaways?
Well, the big one is that China's success isn't just about their political system.
Or their economy?
Right. It's more nuanced.
So it's a mix of things.
It is.
Strategic investment, long-term planning, public good, high ridership.
And maybe that cultural mindset we talked about.
Oh yeah, valuing the collective good.
Right.
And those stats are crazy.
Yeah.
Like needing 7 more lanes in Beijing if they shut down public transit.
It makes you realize just how important it is.
Yeah, it's not just a personal choice thing.
It's fundamental to a modern city.
But can other countries do what China did?
Especially with different cultures and politics.
Yeah.
Is that realistic?
It's the $1 million question.
I know.
But I don't think it's impossible.
So there's hope.
Definitely China shows it can be done.
If we have the will.
in the invest.
And we're willing to think differently.
To challenge the status quo. Like that quote said.
Oh, yeah.
About developed countries and public transit.
Yeah.
It's not about poor people having cars. It's about rich people using public transportation.
It makes you rethink what progress really means.
It does, and it makes us ask what kind of future we want.
For ourselves and future generations.
It's not just about, can we afford to invest in public transit?
It's, can we afford not to?
That's a perfect note to end on.
Yeah.
So to all our listeners, we hope this deep dive gave you something to think about.
We explored China's system, the economics, the culture.
And we challenged some of those assumptions about development.
Hopefully we sparked some new ideas.
If you have any thoughts, share them with us.
On social media, on our website.
Wherever you connect with other deep divers.
Thanks for listening.
And until next time, happy commuting.